You ever hear a story so unsettling, so deeply wrong, that it lingers in your mind long after it's over? The kind that doesn't just scare you, but gets inside your head and refuses to leave? I just wrote something like that. And honestly, I'm still in shock at how disturbing it turned out. At first, things won't make sense. It'll feel off, like trying to piece together a dream right after waking up. You'll think you get it, but then you won't. But trust me, keep watching, because when the truth finally hits, you're gonna wish it hadn't.
I don't remember when it started. Maybe a few weeks ago, or months. Time has this strange way of slipping through my fingers lately, like sand I can't hold on to. All I know is I'm tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired. It doesn't make sense. I sleep. God, I sleep as much as I can. 8, 9, 10 hours a night. Naps during the day when I can sneak them in. But no matter how long I close my eyes, I wake up feeling like I never slept at all. It's like my body is on permanent shutdown mode, running on fumes. Anna, my wife, thinks it's stress. She says I've been working too hard. She's probably right. I've got a good job, but the hours are long, and the pressure's always on. But this feels different. Stress makes you tired, sure. But this feels like something is pulling me under, like I'm being smothered from the inside. Our house is small but cozy, tucked into a quiet neighborhood where the streets are lined with maple trees that glow orange in the fall. You'd think it would be peaceful, but even home doesn't feel right anymore. The walls feel closer than they used to. The rooms, darker. I used to love how the sunlight poured through the windows in the morning, but now it just feels off. Diamond Soy's cold. The kids don't seem to notice. They're young, 5 and 7, full of energy, always running around, laughing, making a mess. I envy them. I watch them play sometimes and wonder how they can be so alive while I feel like a ghost in my own skin. The first time I knew something was really wrong, I was sitting at the dinner table. Anna had made pasta, my favorite, or at least I think it is. The kids were chatting about their day, but their voices felt distant, like they were underwater. I looked down at my plate half empty and realized I didn't remember eating. I stared at the fork in my hand like it was a foreign object. When did I pick it up? When did I even sit down? My heart started to race, but I forced a smile, not wanting to worry Anna. I told myself it was just exhaustion, that I probably zoned out for a bit, but it kept happening. A few nights later, I woke up in the dark. The clock on my nightstand said 2:13 a.m. I turned over to find Anna's side of the bed empty. That wasn't like her. She always stayed in bed once she fell asleep. I got up, rubbing my eyes, and padded down the hallway. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I found her in the kitchen, standing perfectly still in front of the sink. The moonlight through the window cast long shadows across her face. "Anna?" I whispered. She didn't react at first, just kept staring out the window like she was watching something or waiting. "Anna?" I said again, louder this time. She jerked slightly, like she just noticed me. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You scared me. What are you doing up?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, forcing a chuckle. "Everything okay?" She nodded, but there was something off about the way she did it. Too slow, too deliberate. "Just couldn't sleep," she murmured. "Go back to bed." I hesitated, something cold settling in my stomach, but I didn't push it. I went back to bed, staring at the ceiling for what felt like hours before. finally drifting off. The next morning over breakfast, I brought it up. "You were up late last night," I said casually, watching her reaction. She frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "In the kitchen, around 2. I found you staring out the window." She shook her head. "No, I wasn't. I slept through the whole night." I felt a chill creep up my spine. Why would she lie about that? Or had I imagined it? Maybe I was the one who was confused. The exhaustion was playing tricks on me, making me see things that weren't there. That's what I told myself. But the doubt, it lingered. Since then, little things have been piling up. I'll walk into a room and find something out of place. A picture frame turned around. A chair pulled out from the table when no one's been in there. I'll hear whispers when the house is empty, just soft enough that I can't make out the words. I've started locking the bedroom door at night. I tell myself it's to keep the kids from sneaking in and waking me up. But deep down, I don't know who I'm locking the door against. And through it all, I can't shake this feeling, this heavy, suffocating weight in my chest, that something is wrong, that something is coming, or maybe it's already here. The days started to blur together. I'd wake up and wonder if I'd even slept. The same thick fog clouding my mind, like I was dragging myself through wet cement. Anna's been quieter lately, watching me out of the corner of her eye when she thinks I'm not looking. The kids still laugh and play, but even their voices sound distant, hollow, like echoes in an empty house. One night I was sitting on the couch, trying to focus on a TV show I couldn't even name. The colors on the screen bled into each other, the voices a meaningless hum. Anna came into the room holding her phone, her face pale. "You're late," she said. I blinked, confused. "Late for what?" She frowned. "You said you'd be home by 6. It's almost 9. I stared at her, my heart skipping a beat. "I've been here all day." She shook her head, her lips tightening. "No, you weren't. I called you at work around 5 and you said you were heading home." I felt my stomach twist. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember coming back. I looked down at my hands, as if they could explain where I'd been, what I'd done. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered. But even to me, my voice sounded weak, uncertain. Anna didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her eyes dark, like she was trying to see something just beneath my skin. The next morning I woke up alone. Anna's side of the bed was cold. I got up, moving through the house with heavy steps, calling her name. The kids were still asleep, their soft breathing the only sound in the house. I found a note on the kitchen table. Her handwriting was shaky, rushed. "Taking the kid to Mom's for a few days. You need to rest. We'll talk when I get back." My throat tightened. I read the note over and over, hoping the words would change, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But they stayed the same. She left. I sat down, my head in my hands. The house was too quiet, the walls pressing in closer than ever. Without them here, it felt like the air itself was heavier, like I was breathing through a thick, invisible cloth. That's when I noticed it, the faintest sound, like a whisper. I froze, straining to hear. It was coming from the hallway. I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me, and followed the sound. It led me to our bedroom. I pushed the door open, and for a second everything looked normal. But then I saw it, my reflection in the mirror. It wasn't right. I stepped closer, staring at myself, but something was off. My reflection was delayed. It blinked just a second, too late. Moved just a little too slow. I raised my hand, and it followed. But there was a lag, like it was struggling to keep up. I backed away, my pulse pounding in my ears. I closed the door and locked it, trying to convince myself it was just exhaustion, just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Days passed, I think. Without Anna and the kids, time felt meaningless. I barely ate. I barely moved. The house felt like it was swallowing me whole. And then, she came back. It was late. I was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, when I heard the front door open. My heart leapt into my throat. I sat up, my body screaming in protest from the effort. "Anna?" I called out, my voice hoarse. No answer. I got to my feet, every step feeling like I was wading through mud. The lights were off, the house plunged into shadows. I moved toward the hallway, and that's when I saw her, standing at the end of the hall. But something was wrong. She was just standing there, completely still, like a statue. Her face was shrouded in darkness, but I could feel her eyes on me, heavy and unblinking. "Anna?" I whispered again, my voice cracking. She didn't move, didn't speak. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. I took a step back, and that's when she finally moved. A sudden, jerking step forward, like a puppet with tangled strings. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I turned and ran, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I locked myself in the bedroom, pressing my back against the door, listening for footsteps. But there was nothing. Silence. I don't know how long I stayed there, but eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke up, the house was quiet again. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, like nothing had happened. I crept out of the bedroom, every nerve on edge. The front door was locked. The house was empty. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? I found another note on the kitchen table written in the same rushed handwriting. "We need to talk. I'm coming back tonight." My blood ran cold. I stared at the note, my hands trembling. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was it Anna? Was any of this real? I sat down at the table, my head spinning. The lines between reality and nightmare were blurring, and I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. But one thing was certain. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. I didn't sleep after finding that note. How could I? Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the house felt like it was alive, watching me. The walls felt closer, pressing in, suffocating me. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the clock, but the hands didn't seem to move. Maybe they were moving too fast. I couldn't tell anymore. Time didn't make sense. By evening, I felt like I was unraveling. My skin itched, like it didn't belong to me. My head was heavy, pounding with a rhythm that didn't match my heartbeat. The exhaustion was crushing, like an anchor pulling me under. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt something waiting in the dark. I kept hearing voices, whispering. At first, I thought it was Anna and the kids coming back. But when I rushed to the door, no one was there. The whispers would fade, replaced by a ringing in my ears that grew louder and louder until I thought my skull would crack open. And then, the footsteps started. It was around midnight when I heard them. Slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway toward me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see, but I had to. I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me, and peeked into the hallway. There was no one there. But the footsteps didn't stop. They echoed in my head, loud and hollow, like they were coming from inside my skull. I stumbled back into the kitchen, clutching my head, trying to drown out the noise. I knocked over a glass, and it shattered on the floor. The sound was deafening, like a bomb going off. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, but it didn't help. The house was screaming. And then, everything went silent. I lifted my head, my heart racing. The silence was worse than the noise. It felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. That's when I saw her, Anna. She was standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with something I couldn't understand. Fear? Anger? I couldn't tell. She stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "Where are the kids?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer, she just stared at me, her eyes filled with something dark and unrecognizable. "Anna," I tried again, my voice cracking. "What's happening? What's wrong with me?" And then, without warning, she slapped me. The force of it sent me sprawling to the floor. My cheek burned, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I looked up at her, my vision swimming. "What the hell are you doing?" I gasped. "Why?" She slapped me again, harder this time. My head snapped to the side, and I tasted blood in my mouth. "Tell me the truth," she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. "What did you do?" I don't know," I cried, scrambling backward. "I swear I don't." Another slap. The world spun, and for a moment, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I saw her standing over me, her face twisted in rage. "You think you can lie to me?" she hissed. "You think I don't know? I don't understand," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Please, Anna, I don't understand." She knelt down, grabbing me by the collar, her face inches from mine. Her breath was hot against my skin, her eyes wild. "Wake up," she whispered. "Wake up." And then she hit me, one last time. Something snapped. For a moment, everything froze. The pain in my head flared white-hot, blinding me. I felt like I was falling, sinking into something cold and dark. And then I saw it. Not Anna, not my kitchen, not my home. I was on the floor of a filthy, dimly lit room, the cold, hard ground digging into my skin. My wrists burned, chafed raw from heavy metal cuffs. The walls were rough concrete, stained with something dark. The air was thick with sweat, blood, and something even fouler. My heart thundered in my chest as the fog in my mind began to clear. The woman in front of me wasn't Anna. It was a man, a soldier. His uniform was tattered, his face twisted with a cruel smile. He held a baton in one hand, its surface slick with something I didn't want to think about. And I remembered. I remembered everything. I wasn't home. I wasn't safe. I was in captivity. The last few weeks or months came rushing back in broken, fragmented flashes. I was a soldier. I'd been deployed, captured. They hadn't let me sleep. Not really. Just enough to keep me alive, to keep me on the edge of madness. The exhaustion wasn't just fatigue. It was weaponized. They'd torn my mind apart, piece by piece, until I couldn't tell reality from nightmare. Anna, the kids, the house, none of it was real, just dreams. Hallucinations my brain created to shield me from the truth. And now, that shield was gone. The soldier sneered, his voice a guttural growl as he barked something in a language I didn't understand. He raised the baton again, but I didn't flinch this time. I just stared at him, hollow and broken, because I knew I wasn't getting out. I wasn't going home. And the worst part of me didn't even want to. The pain wasn't the worst part. It was the silence that followed. After that last beating, they left me alone in the dark. The cold seeped into my bones, but I barely felt it anymore. My body was just a shell, something distant and foreign. The only thing I could still feel was the crushing weight of realization, like a noose tightening around my mind. I tried to remember Anna's face, the sound of my kids' laughter, but the more I tried, the more those memories felt like sand, slipping through my fingers. Were they ever real, or had I just invented them to survive? The walls of the cell felt closer now. The ceiling seemed lower. My breath echoed too loudly in the cramped space, and for a terrifying second I wondered if the room itself was shrinking, trying to squeeze the last bit of life out of me. Then the door opened. 2 soldiers entered. Their faces were blank, unreadable, like masks stretched over skulls. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. I knew what was coming. They dragged me out of the cell, my legs too weak to hold my weight. My feet scraped against the rough concrete floor, leaving a trail of blood behind me. The hallway outside was dim, flickering with the sickly, yellow light of dying bulbs. The walls were stained, covered in handprints, some smeared, some clawing at the surface as if trying to escape through solid stone. They took me down a corridor that felt endless, each step echoing in my head like a countdown. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was numb. They brought me to a small, windowless room. The walls were tiled, but the white was long gone, stained a permanent rusty brown. In the center of the room was a metal chair, bolted to the floor, with leather straps hanging from the arms and legs like limp, dead snakes. They threw me into the chair. The leather was wet. They strapped me in, pulling the buckles so tight I felt my skin split beneath them. My arms and legs were useless, pinned down like a specimen on a dissection table. One of them tilted my head back and forced my mouth open with a cold metal gag. I could taste rust and something sour. The lights above me buzzed, flickering like they were struggling to stay alive, just like me. And then he entered, the officer. He was different from the others, cleaner, more composed. His uniform was pristine, not a stain or wrinkle in sight. But his eyes were dead, empty, like he'd done this so many times it didn't even register as cruelty anymore. He stepped closer, inspecting me like I was a broken toy, and then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't belong on a human face. He said something in his language, and the soldiers laughed. I didn't understand the words, but I knew what they meant. This was the end. He pulled a knife from his belt, small, sharp, and surgical. Not meant for killing, meant for something much worse. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body wouldn't obey. The exhaustion, the beatings, the endless days without sleep, it had all led to this moment. I was too far gone to resist. He started with my fingernails. One by one, he pried them off, slow and methodical. The pain was blinding, white hot, like fire coursing through my veins. But I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat was raw, my voice long gone. After the nails, he moved to my face. The knife traced lines along my skin, shallow at first, then deeper, peeling away layers like he was trying to find something underneath. The blood ran down my cheeks in hot, sticky rivers, pooling in my lap. I lost track of time. Minutes? Hours? It didn't matter. The pain was endless, a constant tide that swallowed me whole. But through it all, I kept thinking of Anna. Her face, her voice, the way she laughed when I tickled her. I held on to those memories like a lifeline, even as I felt myself slipping further into the abyss. the worst part? The part that broke me? I couldn't remember my kids' names. No matter how hard I tried, their names were gone, erased like chalk from a blackboard. That's when I knew they'd won. Eventually, the officer grew bored. He wiped his knife on my shirt like I was nothing more than a piece of meat. He said something to the soldiers and they unstrapped me from the chair. I collapsed to the floor, a broken, bleeding heap. They dragged me down another hallway, my body leaving smears of red on the tiles. I didn't fight. I didn't struggle. I just let them. They brought me outside. The air was thick and humid, the night sky heavy with dark clouds. I could hear the distant sounds of the jungle, the chirping of insects, the rustle of leaves. But it all felt unreal, like I was listening to a recording. They threw me into a pit. The ground was soft, wet, and smelled of decay. I landed on something cold and lumpy. It took me a second to realize it was bodies. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. The officer stood at the edge of the pit, looking down at me with those empty eyes. He raised his pistol, the barrel glinting in the moonlight. And for a moment, I felt relief. At least it was over. At least the nightmare would finally end. But he didn't pull the trigger. He just smiled that same inhuman smile, said something to his men, and walked away. They left me there, alive, buried beneath the weight of the dead, alone with my memories, alone with the knowledge that even death wouldn't set me free, because the real prison wasn't this pit, or the cell, or even the jungle. It was my own mind. And as the darkness pressed in, heavier than before, all I could think was, God, I'm so tired. I just want to sleep.